Hello, everyone. Welcome to episode 4 of Technically Not Speaking. My name is Chaitanya, and I am a product manager currently working at Walmart. And this is my co host.
Hi, I'm Prachi, and I am a product marketing manager. I have worked with a lot of startups and enterprises, and like Chai, I'm an AI enthusiast, but I've also worked on launching a bunch of these services and platforms. And we are here today with episode 4.
Yes, and for those of you who have been following us in our journey and who have made it to episode 4, thank you so much for your support. We hope that this episode will also uncover all the facts and stories that were left in the past. Just a bit of a recap here. In our last episode, which was episode 3, we specifically spoke about 3 distinct civilizations: Peruvian civilization, the Mayan civilization, and Roman civilization. Today,
We will be taking you into 15th century Europe. And to what Chaitanya said, like we are following the timelining, time stamping approach, where we're drawing the parallels from our history, from all that we've done across different mythologies, civilizations, and we're trying to draw these parallels to modern day tech and AI.
let's get started.
Yes. So we'll jump, like we said, we're doing this timelining approach. This is 15th century Europe. So now, centuries of slow progress. We saw Europe was pretty much in dark ages. We spoke about Mayans, Incans, Romans, Greeks, everyone, and even Asia for that matter, who were doing like all these cool things. But Europe was subdued and trade eventually started growing. Artists, scientists, and engineers that were beginning to challenge the long conventional belief of the church. And this was Renaissance. So era of rediscovery, reinvention. Think of it like the rebooted operating system for a human mind. And we do remember great artists. There was Michelangelo, there was Da Vinci, Van Gogh, and from Sistine Chapel and flying machines is what we remember. But the period dawned a lot of scientific discoveries, and there was something deeper that was happening beneath all the marble and stone.
You very nicely put it together, how we moved from a whole different civilization. We suddenly jumped into maybe the beginning of modern civilization. We can call early 15th or 16th century as the beginning of modern civilization, right?
Yeah, pretty much for Europe per se, right? Because we've covered it in our last 3 episodes that all the other civilizations across the world are making so much progress.
Yeah.
So,
So today, Prachi, what stories are we going to be covering in this
so
civilization?
absolutely. We will be talking about 3 very distinct individuals. We'll talk about Gutenberg. I'm sure our listeners and our viewers have heard many stories about them.
Yeah.
But we will talk about what they did and how that connects to where we are today from a tech and AI perspective. And we'll start with Gutenberg first because he came first chronologically. That was 1440s. Then we'll go into 1500s and then 1600s.
Sounds good.
All right, so let's get into it. For those who do not know who Johannes Gutenberg is, he was essentially the guy who created the printing press, right? And what actually pushed him was that I'll get into what he was. So he was a trained goldsmith and a metal worker. He understood casting and worked with materials like lead and tin. And he saw that there is an increasingly high demand for books because literacy is rising. And the manual copying was very inefficient. Like a single Bible could take over a year to produce by a monk, right? And then he saw that there was this great market opportunity that he could produce these books cheaper and faster and
Yeah.
tap into the growing demand. And because he had the metalworking background, he invented a movable type of a printing press that you could reuse it, and the individual metal letters he combined it with oil based ink and a screw press. So think of it like it became a complete high speeding printing system. And although he didn't set out to change history, he set out to only solve a practical problem, like how can you make books faster, cheaper, and more consistent.
Yeah.
He, in a way, laid infrastructure for mass communication, scientific exchange. Maybe we can call it like modern internet because you're connecting knowledge sources.
Yeah. I mean, if you think of it, right,
Yeah.
he actually took a problem that exists. Like books were like copied by hand and they used to take over a year to make one book. Imagine waiting a whole year for someone to handwrite you a book, and then in today's day and age, PDF takes 5 seconds to load.
I think n- knowledge becoming scalable, that's the foundation of it. Because if it's reproducible, it's viral. A
Yeah.
single press can churn out 3,600 pages a day. Compared to like just you just mentioned, like by hand, it's not easy. And I
Yeah.
believe by 1500, European presses, they produced over 20 million books. Where would we be today if that knowledge was not captured?
Yeah.
So I think he just didn't invent a machine. Think of this like he built a first content delivery network. So if you have to print out pamphlets for sailors to carry the news or books to distant ports, that's how knowledge was shared. The world has never been connected like this. Like, imagine if you are in one part of Europe, France or Germany or Italy or somewhere, or you're in one of the port cities. You're
Yeah.
carrying as a sailor those books, you're carrying it to different countries. And it's think of can we say he created digital influencers of the time?
Yeah. So this is basically a 1400 version of tweet thread. Like everything is linked, and then you can actually go back and map it to where did you get this information from.
Yeah.
That was revolutionary for that time. We have to always spin it back to what age and time these inventions took place. This is literally eureka moment.
Cloud of its time, right? And I think this was a catalyst. Like we discussed Copernicus and Galileo, they could have not done what they've done without this. It was a catalyst. Because of this, you could spread all these Renaissance ideas, right? Everyone was questioning things at that time. And I think Copernicus, Galileo, even Newton for that matter, they wouldn't have traveled. How would the work of these thinkers traveled? Although it wasn't what he started out with, he unlocked the tools to share idea. And yeah, we'll get into both the figures later on.
Very interesting. It's cool how when someone was just trying to like solve a problem that led to even today's day and age, we are still dealing with the ripple effects of the invention that he created.
Absolutely. And I think that is what is fascinating. It just probes you to think. Imagine if you have all this intelligence, you have all these intelligent people, but if it's
Yeah.
just you, it's of no use. I think a great networking system. We'll get into Copernicus next. I know this is AI generated image, but we'll fast forward to a century. So you have to realize Renaissance was not just one century, it spanned across, I think, yeah,
Yeah.
1500s, 1600, even I think beyond that. Nicholas Copernicus, he was this Polish astronomer and he was quietly working on a manuscript that would get him branded as a heretic because church would discard all the ideas that would have scientific basis. 1543 was just before his death. He published on the revolution of heavenly spheres and said that the earth orbits the sun, not the other way around. And because Aristotle in church, how Aristotle said is that the earth is in the center,
Yeah.
everything else revolves around it. It was difficult, right? If someone would go and challenge that. What he did was that he doesn't just offer this new opinion or new theory. He built a better model, one which has like math, observation, pattern recognition, but then there's dogma. You can't let data speak. So, in doing so, he created this interdisciplinary system model. So, physics, astronomy, mathematics, he made them work together to describe the reality. He predicted the retrograde motion, he calculated planetary positions, and this was like centuries before computers could do it. So, this is like his, I would say, an early version of predictive analytics, right?
Yeah. Definitely. And I think when you were talking about his story, when you said he was doing it quietly, our listeners who don't know about Copernicus spent decades quietly building this heliocentric model. Like he was working on this big idea alone for about 20 years, and everyone says that this is wrong. But I think I get it now, right? When you're working on such a big idea that could literally get you branded as a peer reviewer in today's day and age, we have peer reviews on these scientific papers, that we have people with knowledge and information who go and review these docs. So it's more on the lines of him predicting and publishing.
Absolutely. So I would also say that he was the precursor to model based
Hmm.
thinking. I think something our listeners may also think about is that progress starts when we question what we think we know. That was the biggest thing because nobody challenged it. You let the model speak louder than the myth. Just because one theory has been established doesn't mean it's correct.
Yeah, actually, that's exactly what AI does now. You replace your gut feeling with patterns because there is data that is backing all of that.
Yeah. So, what happened across that period in Europe was just people getting to know these ideas. They were trying to question. Questioning is so important. One was okay, content delivery, knowledge sharing, but with that came a lot of opinions, a lot of data, a lot of ideas, and a lot of new hypotheses were getting built. And the old was questioned, the church was questioned. We're also doing that in some way, is challenging. Although it's us who are feeding that information, it's interesting. That's why we're doing this.
Definitely. I think that's the whole idea of this podcast. I guess now we have to just wrap up about Gutenberg and Copernicus. So
Yeah.
we know that Gutenberg helped us to share ideas faster because then came in and taught us to rethink about foundations. I think now we can start heading towards the guy who actually tested all of it. This man, Galileo Galilei, with everyone who's studied history should be aware. So he's very famous for inventing the telescope, right? But I want to take a whole different view on how I want to share his story here. Galileo was this person who was trying to prove the universe wrong. So, see, Galileo didn't come across as like a scholar, any of the traditional scholars before him, right? He doesn't accept truth just because it's written or preached by orthodox preachers. He's more on the lines of, I need to see it, measure it, and test it. And this is early 16th century we're talking about. He takes a very basic Dutch spyglass, which has a 3x magnification, and then he rebuilds it. And then one night he just decides that I'm going to take this glass, magnifying glass, and I'm going to point it to the sky. And whatever he sees changes everything. That's where he sees craters on the moon, and then the whole ideology that moon is smooth and it's a divine perfection, everything is like diminished because it's those are all flaws. And then he sees Jupiter and the moon's orbiting around Jupiter. So that's another lie, right? Saying that whole concept around like when Copernicus said that Earth is revolving around Sun and not the other way around, which is something why this whole invention that he invented was proving that.
Yeah.
And if I go a little deeper, he doesn't stop there. He rolls the balls down ramps. He'll sit on the top of the hill and start rolling a ball or some object down there. And then he'll keep repeating it time and over. And not because he wants to make a point, but to prove there is a reason behind everything. That's where the game changing aspect comes in. He was not just observing, he was experimenting, asking questions, listening to the answers. And then based on that, he used to then reiterate and build a whole feedback mechanism, whole feedback loop. And then he started writing everything down, he started publishing it. And that's where his story of being this scientific genius back in the 16th century came in place.
He was called the father of modern science, right?
Yeah.
And he also had to live under house arrest for a big chunk of his life because he believed truth comes not from authority, but evidence and repeatability. You are questioning everything. If you were to draw that parallel AI systems, any model learns through
Yeah.
trial, feedback, observation.
So
So
I think that's what I was trying to get at. What does all this have to do with AI? Yeah, we know he invented a telescope, but what is it? It's actually a lot to your point, Prachi, where you said it's based on feedback and how AI systems learn from itself, which is trial, error, and correction. And that is what reinforcement learning is. So the whole idea of sharing Galileo's story here was to let y'all understand that whatever he was doing is what we are getting our AI models to do. Today's AI doesn't learn from textbooks. It plays, it fails, it tries again.
yeah,
And whether it is mastering chess or training a robot to walk or even using bits to learn different algos. That's what Galileo did in his entire application that he was doing. And although his telescope was basic, it was enough, right? Even the simplest of AI models today, when trained right, they can evolve into something extraordinary. That's where, for the ones who are getting accustomed to the whole AI world now, don't get too worked down on how will I make this work. There is something called prompt engineering, which is very basic to understanding how do you give the right prompts for you to get the desired output.
Yeah. So trust the data, you test your assumptions, and you don't be afraid to challenge. If there is evidence that's required, you provide that and then you keep iterating on it. What I feel Gutenberg, Copernicus, and Galileo have in common is Gutenberg gave us the ability to scale knowledge. Copernicus taught us how to model the world, and Galileo showed us how to test it with evidence. Together, they help build that mental blueprint in how we develop AI today. As we continue to build smarter systems, the real challenge is remembering what these thinkers understood. You
Yeah,
have to keep challenging it, the authority, pushing it and pushing the envelope.
yeah,
And truth is worth pursuing. Models should match reality. And intelligence, when shared, can change the world. And I think that's a real takeaway from our stories.
that was rightly put, very simply put, and very clearly defined. And I guess that is all we have for our episode, which is our fourth episode. We hope that y'all enjoyed this conversation, and we hope to be back with our next episode with some interesting stories from a more modern perspective. For now, we're signing off. Thank you so much for tuning in. This is Chaitanya.
And this is Prachi, and you are listening to us on Technically Not Speaking.